Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of March 2020. These are the fire signs, so we're going to look at Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So we'll start with Aries. At the very beginning of the month, we have a series of transits between the 1st and the 10th that are very powerful, and then another series between, say, the 20th and the end of the month, and those are the ones we're going to be focusing on for all of the horoscopes this month. So first of all, let's take a look at what's happening between the 1st and say the 9th or the 10th. First big transit is Venus is in your home sign, making a square to Saturn between your 1st and your 10th houses. First house is a very personal house, has to do with you, yourself, your body, your psychology, your vitality and health. And the 10th house is the house of work, your work in the world, the pursuit of, power and success and career and things like that. When Venus squares Saturn between your 1st and 10th house, you could say that you're at something of a personal crossroads with regard to your sense of who you are and your work in the world, and that you might be looking at rewards for hard work done, the deepening of commitments, more serious recognition for hard work, which Venus and Saturn can award. But at the same time, Venus-Saturn can mean that there are difficult decisions or the need to terminate a contract or say no to something or end something or consolidate or simplify or reduce something. And that may not be entirely easy to do, or you may have to make some decisions that are sort of harder and they may not please everyone, or it may not be, you may not feel great about some difficult choice that you're faced with or something like that. Now, that is at the very start of the month, but then Venus immediately after that dynamic goes into this kind of breakthrough moment, you could say, as it makes a conjunction to, as it makes a conjunction to Uranus in your 2nd house, which is the house of money and finances. So the potential for this, the immediate feeling at the beginning of the month, the stress and tension you might be feeling personally in relation to the workplace. You go into this conjunction with Uranus in the 2nd house of money and finances, and there's potential for some kind of real breakthrough that could be quite positive. Venus and Uranus is creative, it's individualistic, it is eccentric and likes to think outside of the box. It brings both good fortune, Venus, and breakthroughs and greater freedom and originality. So you're thinking about this kind of maybe erratic and disruptive, but ultimately sort of productive and fortunate energy of Venus-Uranus in your 2nd house of money and finances by the, say all the way up to like the 9th. So that is the first major transit of the month. Now, right around the same period of time, there's another transit that is constellating for you, and that is going to be the full moon in Virgo in your 6th house opposite the Sun-Neptune conjunction in your 12th house. Now, these houses were originally called, all of the cadent houses were called metacosmios, which means like worlds in between worlds. And so the full moon in the 6th house, for example, could spell a period of having to work really hard at something, or there being a productive but really labor-intensive period coming up. It can also highlight issues around, conflicts related to money or the workplace, or just stress and tension and hard labor around money and work and business. It can also be about the desire to do something practical or to gain or develop practical skills and to implement them in the world, or even to be of service in some way. And it can also indicate maybe some challenges around, mental, physical, emotional health, because the 6th house is also a house that pertains to health and sickness. So the 12th house, meanwhile, the Neptune-Sun conjunction in that house can be very otherworldly, mystical, inspiring, religious and spiritual, but it can also pertain to, delusions or I almost want to say like fantasies that you may be buying into that somehow aren't healthy or are aggrandized. There's sort of a delusion of grandeur somewhere in there. So you do want to be careful to be really realistic and grounded during the 7th, 8th, 9th period, but don't be surprised if there's also some need to go inward and for there to be an experience of inspiration, faith, and some need for solitude or just inner time to process something and some healing that needs to be done. But that, you know, there's always a fine line with a Neptune Sun transit between that inspiring visionary state that comes through and kind of a really ungrounded, sort of undisciplined idea or approach to something that can kind of take over. So just be careful of those tensions right around that time. Now, when we go forward to later in the month, the next big transit of the month is, of course, huge for you as an Aries, because it is the of course, it is the equinox, and the equinox means the sun is moving into your sign. If you're an Aries sun sign, it's almost your birthday season. But this is followed by a new moon in Aries, which is happening on the 4th, or the 4th. It's happening on the 24th. And you can see that right here. Now, all of this in Mars, exalted sun in entering your first house in Aries, new moon in Aries, hosted by who? Mars, exalted Mars in Capricorn, who is going through conjunctions to Pluto and Jupiter between the 20th and 24th. So this is inceptional. This has the feeling of starting something, or of a new initiative or new incentive, or just a blast of really intense Mars energy coming through, which is both conflict and aggression, as well as action and will and strength. That's coming through in a workhouse. Is very, you know, hardworking, practical, achievement-driven Capricorn energy in the 10th house. It's also very personal. It's about some kind of fresh new beginning, or some chapter that you're trying to, you know, you're trying to turn the page and start a new chapter, kind of trying to press the reset. And it could be that you know, don't push too hard, don't be sort of too ruthless. Mars can be like that and lead to some explosive conflicts, or I think we're all going to be in looking very carefully at the proper use of power and will and force and strength around these transits. So just make sure that you're being you know, a kind, gentle person, even if you're feeling really fired up and productive. That's important advice for everyone, but especially you, because it's pouring in through your first house, and you might be feeling like someone's just dumped a bunch of fuel on the fire around this time. So look for that to be a time of personal empowerment and real transformation in the workplace, or real productivity in the workplace. The other major transit that's coming through for you is, of course, on the 22nd, Saturn is entering Aquarius. You're getting a preview of what Saturn's going to be doing in your chart for the next couple of years. And Saturn's going to back out by retrograde and then come back by the end of the year. And then you'll have Saturn really camping out in your 11th house for some time. But the preview you're getting has to do with, you know, the Lord of Karma and time, slow moving Saturn, moving into the 11th house of friends, groups, colleagues, allies. And so some really deep lessons and learning experiences relative to groups and friends and colleagues over the next couple of years. Saturn can bring about, you know, can bring elders into your life and experience, people who have a lot of gravity and, you know, really maybe some amazing wisdom to offer you. Saturn can be the teacher, but Saturn can also be about the hard, cold reality that we have to face, that we've been avoiding or not seeing. Saturn is a big dose of let's get real around friends and groups. You know, your social life might be changing, and it might need to sort of level up or grow up or mature in some way, not all of which may be easy, but you could also think of this as having really solid, mature commitments and almost like social bonds coming in that are going to be more defined and more, you know, they may also grow up and become much more useful to you. So at any rate, that's what you're looking at with Saturn there. We'll do a deeper take on that later in the year when Saturn comes all the way back to stay for the next couple of years, but getting a preview of it starting this month in March. So that is what we've got for Aries. Let's wind this back and start over for Leos. We'll put Leo on the ascendant now. And here's Leo for Leo sun or Leo rising. At the beginning of the month, we're seeing Venus in Aries making the square to Saturn in Capricorn between your 9th and your 6th houses. Now, again, for everyone, this could spell some amount of contraction and heaviness or seriousness around relationships. That's a Venus-Saturn dynamic no matter what. Relationships can level up, can grow up, can become more responsible, more disciplined, more mature, more committed. Those are all positive things. Between the 9th and the 6th house with Venus in Aries, you have to be careful about your beliefs, ninth house, because we've got Venus in the sign of Mars, the god of war, square to Saturn in the house that was traditionally called the joy of Mars. It was a military house, the sixth house, and a place of conflict and misfortune. You do have to be careful of those kind of principled, fights that you get in, about opinions and beliefs and ideals, and some, level of sort of principled, stubborn conflict that could arise at the beginning of the month. But not all conflicts are bad. We need to have some of them. Sometimes clarifying our principles and our beliefs or our best practices, or even the hard work of learning something and disciplining ourselves in some way that may pay off later, or that is paying off right now. Venus Saturn can be sort of rewards for hard work done. And this would be in something related to faith, beliefs, education, something like that. This can also, unfortunately, if you're traveling, like, you want to be really careful. Venus in the ninth square Saturn in the sixth can mean that there are just those, lessons you learn while you're on the road. So those can come up a little bit with Venus square Saturn. The other thing that can come up here is, of course, that, Venus Saturn sometimes says that agreements, relationships are no longer feasible. It just, they can't work any longer. And so potentially having to make some hard choices about relationships. The mature, serious choice is probably the right one around this time. It will lead to good things. Now, you move forward to like the ninth, and you're going to see Venus going into a conjunction. Let's back this up a little bit. Here we go. So Venus is then going into a conjunction with Uranus in your 10th house. Whatever you're doing at the beginning, even if it's of the month, even if it's a little tense, as I've just been describing, Venus is going to hit a conjunction to original, erratic, liberating Uranus in your career house, which should bring some kind of creative revolution, even if it's sort of small. It should bring just a kind of a cool breeze, and maybe a little sparkly and electrical at the same time into the career house. So, Venus is the goddess of good fortune, and she's entering the career house to stay for a little bit. That bodes well for you in your career house, conjoining the inventive but sometimes sort of erratic and disruptive Uranus. That should mean that there is healthy, sort of revolutionary, inventive energy in the air, inspiring and original. You have to be careful of people like, I want to do it my way, there's no way but my way, or this kind of rebellious energy that might be in the air. And that may shape the entire movement of Venus square Saturn to Venus Uranus, which is like, you know what, I'm not feeling this, I'm not liking this, I don't care what you think, I'm going to do it my own way. And maybe that needs to happen in some way. In some cases, I could see that needing to be the thing that happens. But you also have Venus conjoining Uranus and saying, there's going to be this breakthrough that comes right on the heels of needing to make some kind of hard, sober decision. Then it's like, boom, it's right after that, there's just kind of fireworks. So that should be an interesting combination of planets for Leos this month, especially because Venus is going from these cadent houses right into this angular house, where often big things get done really quickly with a conjunction like this. So anyway, around the 7th, 8th, and 9th, there's also another transit forming basically at the same exact time. I'm going to put that up right now so that you can see it. Excuse me. This is happening between the Sun and Neptune in the 8th house, and the full moon in Virgo in the 2nd house. These are your financial houses. The full moon is calling attention to your financial house this month, to details that need to happen there, or to some kind of turnaround that's happening in finances. Could be related to relationships, because the dispositor of this full moon is Mercury, who's also turning direct after a retrograde in the 7th house of relationships, and going to pop back into the 8th house where it was retrograde last month. So general questions about my money versus your money, my assets and resources and values and likes and dislikes versus yours, whoever that other person is, a lover or a business partner or people that you're somehow in contact with in your life right now. So financial issues, and both the question of self-sufficiency and dependency, debts, obligations to other people, things that we share with other people, versus, the things that we do for ourselves, or the way in which we rely upon our own skills and abilities and our own pocketbook and things like that. So the tension between those two areas can be seen right around this time between the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then you also think about the Sun Neptune in the 8th. You do have to be careful about boundaries, about giving and taking from people, of being used or of using. Also, the potential for there to be some almost like someone coming into our life, or there some kind of karmic exchange with someone in our life that's sort of miraculous or otherworldly. That's the Sun Neptune in the 8th, which can highlight almost kind of trans-rational exchanges with other people, where it's kind of these synchronicities that pop up, and karmas and karmic debts that are being cleared in very mysterious ways. So you can watch for that as well. Now we flash forward again to later in the month when the next big transits come through, and it's going to be the 20th to the 24th when we see the new moon in Aries along with the spring equinox in Aries. That's falling in your 9th house, the place of faith, religion, higher education, learning, long journeys. So there is a very strong energy surrounding your faith life, your beliefs this month that comes through. And what is it being hosted by? Mars. Where is Mars? Exalted in the 6th house, powering through conjunctions to Pluto and Jupiter between the 20th and 24th as well. So this is just this very explosive time of the month. I'm thinking it's going to be, you're definitely going to see this in the news. For you, so much of it has to do with the fierceness, commitment, strength, power, aggression of your beliefs, your ideals, of something that you're learning, of teachers and teaching, of traveling or other countries. Those are topics that you could see, and you should also feel this surge of Mars energy around those topics. Well, Mars in the 6th, at the best, this could be that something about mobilizing your beliefs or studying something in a really disciplined, powerful way, or of some kind of really productive energy, but very grueling or hardworking energy is there. Probably, again, in service of faith, beliefs, learning something. But the potential is also there for principled conflicts with other people, meaning I believe this, you believe this, one of us is right and one of us is wrong. Let's duke it out. So be careful of that, because this could be a very intense time for, not good dinner table conversation, basically, you know what I mean? So sometimes we have to have those conflicts, but you just want to be careful. This can be a little bit ruthless. Remember that whatever kinds of people you are agreeing with or disagreeing with, or whatever way in which you're sort of mobilizing your beliefs at this time, remember that, ultimately, if we can't do it with compassion and kindness, then how important or how strong is it really? So that's something to think about toward the end of the month. Now, the other major transit that's coming through for you at the very end of the month is, of course, Saturn entering your 7th house of relationships. Now, that's a transit that you're giving a preview of it in the spring for a couple of months before it backs out and retrogrades at the end of the year. Then it'll come back and stay for several years in the sign of Aquarius. What does that mean? Means the Lord of Karma, Saturn, is about to come into your marriage and relationship house to stay for several years. This means deeper lessons around your relationships are going to be appearing. You may get a little taste for in the next couple of months. It can mean anything from, breakups to deepening of commitments, because Saturn really just represents that we are reaping what's been sown. So it's the Lord of Karma has come around. The great judge in the sky, you could say, is coming into the relationship house. Sometimes you meet people. Sometimes a spouse gets a raise, or we meet someone really fantastic and the commitment deepens. Saturn was in my 7th house. I got married. So commitments can be, deepened and, solidified. But you can also see, a lot of times Saturn goes into the 7th. If the relationship is on the rocks, you're either working through it and going to therapy, or you might be breaking up. Saturn in the 7th can also mean that there's just a greater degree of responsibility socially or publicly that you're starting to take on. 7th house is a general house that has to do with our social life, and Saturn is a planet of more grave, serious, responsible, more responsibility. So you can watch for those kinds of things as well. We'll revisit this later in the year and take a deeper dive with Saturn in your 7th house for sure. So that's what I've got for you, Leos, for the month. Let's back up and do this all over again with Sagittarius. So here we are. Put Sagittarius on the ascendant and do this all over again. Here we go. So Venus at the beginning of the month, again, is in late Aries, making a square to Saturn in Capricorn in your second house from the fifth house. First of all, this combination, second house and fifth house combinations, often bring up a prioritization of our money, our time, our energy, and we might be asking questions about what I have to do versus what I really want to do, what I desire, what kind of pleasure or enjoyment I'm seeking, or what kind of creative outlet I need in my life versus the responsibilities and obligations and duties that I have. So those questions become really intense. Potentially costs or expenses related to children or pregnancy can also come up during this time. Issues around, just your prioritization or time and energy that you spend with your kids and the need to maybe spend more. Also, sometimes Venus Saturn across this axis says, look, there's rewards coming in and good fortune coming in. Venus is the planet of good fortune, and Venus's traditional house was the fifth house, the house of good fortune. Square Saturn in the second, a very well dignified Saturn, rewards and enjoyable things coming across from hard work done in the past. So you could see that coming through, as well. Now you go forward to like the ninth, and you're going to see Venus hopping into Taurus and getting into a conjunction with Uranus. And that's happening in the sixth house. Now that's an interesting signature. You have a very well dignified Venus, but entering a difficult house. Sixth house is a house of grueling labor. It's the hard work under the heat of the sun house. And with Venus conjoining Uranus in that house, there can be some good fortune and some breakthroughs. Those are sort of Venus-Uranus combinations, like the unexpected, erratic, but ultimately pleasing, inspiring, or creative breakthrough. But you're also putting it in a house that's usually about, kind of meeting the house, traditional house of misfortune. So just dealing with stuff, circumstances that come up sort of unexpectedly that sort of disrupt the status quo and aren't exactly easy to deal with. Or sometimes, you get a cold, or, you have to you got to replace a tire on a car, or there's just kind of the house of nagging, unfortunate or difficult stuff that comes up, which we all deal with, right? And it could come on kind of suddenly and erratically. But the weird thing is here that there's also a signature of breakthrough and good fortune with it. So a really mixed thing. Like, there's definitely a silver lining in anything unexpected and difficult that comes up during this time. The only other advice here is being careful of, this is a kind of provocative transit with Venus hitting Uranus in the sixth. You want to be careful of not burning bridges or making a statement that's too loud and disregarding other people, because it could lead to conflict, even if you're doing it with, you're being fun, and so something that you do that's sort of fun and irreverent could trigger people. So be a little bit careful of that. Those are a few thoughts that I have about Venus conjoined Uranus in the sixth. It's certainly a quirky transit. I'd really love to hear your stories about that one in particular. Going forward later in the month, of course, on the 20th, we have the big, huge moment of the month for everyone. So for Sag, that's going to be your spring equinox, sun ingressing into Aries, light half of the year taking over. And then on the 24th, we have the new moon in Aries coming through. And this is all in your fifth house. The fifth house, traditionally a house of pleasure and joy, and where we seek pleasing or pleasant things, whether it's romance or going to a sporting event or playing sports, or if it's creativity or the stage or theater or acting or playing music. All of that kind of enjoyable, performative, creative stuff is in the fifth house, as is, sometimes sex and babies. So, there could be, I'd not be surprised to see some Sages getting pregnant this month. But the other thing is, of course, who's the host of this new moon and exalted solar energy in Aries? Well, it's Mars. And what is Mars doing? Mars is making conjunctions to Jupiter and to Pluto in the second house. And this is an exalted Mars. Very, very productive, hardworking energy, some kind of creative project that you are pouring some resources into, or some transformation around money and finances, maybe something creative that's happening that's necessitating some kind of change around money or business or work. It could be a very productive new project that you're trying to launch, meaning that it with the exalted Mars energy behind it, it looks like something could really succeed here that you're starting or launching. On the other hand, because Mars is hitting fallen Jupiter and Pluto, you have to be careful of almost like pushing too hard, being a little bit too ruthless or cutthroat in the methods or way in which you're going about trying to get things done. This is a principled Mars, but potentially a very contentious Mars that will bulldoze anything and everyone. And even though the fifth house, generally is going to tap into our need for creative self-expression and the need to march to the beat of our own creative drum, and there's a lot of strength and vigor to do so, you just want to be careful because this may be a more explosive Mars energy that could result in some unintended consequences or conflicts if it's too bulldozing. All right, so I'm saying that for everyone this month. But anyway, Saturn, the other thing is on the 22nd, Saturn's going to switch signs. And that's a big deal because Saturn takes several years to go through every sign. You're getting a preview of this for a couple of months before Saturn's going to retrograde out. So we'll do a deeper dive into this later in the year. But the gist of this is that the third house has a lot to do with your mind, with communication, and with the immediate environment. The great thing about Saturn in the third house is it can help you get more organized. It can help you set up structures that maximize your productivity or that help you become more stable or grounded. It's a great time for learning things that are very, big subjects that require a lot of time and discipline and effort, like learning a language or learning astrology or something like that. But Saturn in the third can also mean that, that there are deeper lessons that have to be learned, as always with Saturn, around communication in your relationships or sometimes with siblings, and also just looking at the different kinds of, we all have mental patterns that aren't healthy for us. And Saturn in the third over a couple of years will really have you slowing down and looking very carefully at which mental habits, patterns, behaviors are healthy and which aren't. So those are a few things to think about with Saturn entering your third. So that is what I have for you fire signs this month. Thank you for watching. I would love to hear your comments and your questions or your experiences and stories. Best way to engage with this is to come back and watch it a few times. It'll keep giving you something as you track the transits through the month and revisit these forecasts. And of course, there's always combinations and ways that these energies show up that are brand new to me, that I hear them for the first time, and it really changes me as an astrologer. So please do share your stories and tell me what's happening to you and how these energies are manifesting in your life. All right. Make sure you also check out the monthly overview for March, the whole video that I did on all of the transits of March. And I look forward to breaking them down with you as the month goes along. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.